Okay, welcome everyone. Today is a special edition of the Visionary Leadership Training Calls, one that is really arising out of necessity because I think now is the time to have a conversation like this. And today we're talking about Bitcoin and the decentralization of the global financial system. And this aligns very deeply with the concepts of visionary leadership. And I trust that as we have this conversation, it'll become clear how decentralization, personal sovereignty, and this move that is happening, this evolution that is occurring globally across civilization from centralized systems where everyone gives their power away to a centralized structure, shifting to decentralized systems where everyone learns to hold their own power. That's what's happening at a broader scale in human civilization right now, and we're living through it in slow motion. And so today's visionary leadership call is going to touch on some of these themes. I'm going to introduce the concept of Bitcoin. I'm going to share a little bit about my understanding of it and maybe touch on a couple of interesting points from my personal wealth journey with Bitcoin and some of the larger movements. And then we'll tie it in also to this visionary leadership concept of decentralization and sovereignty as we go. Okay, so to get us started in the chat, I would like to know, how familiar are you with Bitcoin specifically? Bitcoin specifically. Do you consider yourself a beginner, intermediate, advanced, somewhere in between? You can just drop a couple words in the chat just so I can take a little test of the temperature and see where we all are. Oh, Frank, I didn't even see you hop on there. Welcome, Frank. Frank is pretty advanced, yes. Frank's been in the decentralized financial system for a long time. We've been talking about that for a while. Okay, we have beginner to intermediate, have a general understanding. Excellent. Okay. I have only heard of it. I don't own anything. Okay. Okay, good. Yes. All right. So yeah, that's helpful. The rest of you, if you have a chance to add in the chat, are you beginner to this topic, somewhere around intermediate, maybe advanced, somewhere in between? Just let me know. That'll help me get a feel for the audience here. Okay, so let's start this conversation with some very clear and obvious disclaimers, right? So the whole point of learning about something like Bitcoin, the whole point of learning about it is to begin to take your financial destiny into your own hands. Okay, again, we're moving towards decentralization of everything. The conversation about Bitcoin is a conversation about being your own bank, being your own bank, okay? Bankrolling your own life, not needing centralized structures in the way that we've needed them in the past. I'm not saying centralized structures don't still play a role, but we're not going to need them in the way that we needed them in the past. Okay, because again, we're moving towards personal sovereignty, personal responsibility, and decentralization. Okay, so the question I had for the chat was, where are you in this conversation? Beginner, intermediate, advanced, somewhere in between? Okay, so the voice you hear speaking right now, I am not legally qualified to give financial advice. Okay, so nothing that we talk about today is meant to be interpreted as financial advice. And again, the whole reason why we're talking about this is because we're moving away from needing other people to tell us what to do. This is now a paradigm where we learn about the technologies ourselves. We learn about how civilization is evolving, and then we learn how to be responsible with our own financial prosperity. And that's the Bitcoin conversation. That's what Bitcoin is. That's what it's all about. Okay, so everything we're going to talk about today is intended to be educational only. And really, my goal, I will consider this call to be a success if you leave this call in 53 minutes from now inspired to do more research and to learn more about what we're talking about today. Okay, that's the metric of success. In my videos online, my YouTube channel, I never have told anyone to buy Bitcoin. You will never hear me tell you to buy Bitcoin. I will only ever tell you to educate yourself on the technology. And most people, once they fully understand what it is, they will then make their own choice about whether or not to buy it. Okay, so again, the whole idea is to educate yourself on what it is. And really, as mystics, from our perspective of it, personal sovereignty and decentralization, the goal is for us to make personal decisions about our wealth and prosperity based on our vision, not based on what some online influencer is telling us to do. Okay, and that even includes me. Okay, so don't do anything because I said something. Learn about it, form your own vision. If you do decide to buy Bitcoin and it's based on your own vision, now you're confident in what you own because you understand it. You understand the vision for what it means for human civilization, this digital sound money. And having that vision will allow you to hold through the ups and downs, the inevitable ups and downs, as it fluctuates in value against, traditional fiat currencies that are printed by, banks, central banks out of thin air. It fluctuates in value based on that old system. And people who don't understand the technology that is Bitcoin could find those fluctuations unnerving. But as mystics, when we hold a vision of something, we understand there's a bridge of incidence and that the ups and downs are just simply a part of walking the bridge. Okay, so with that being said, let's talk about Bitcoin. Okay, so Bitcoin is a decentralized digital currency. It is the first new financial asset in 500 years. Okay, so gold, we understand a little bit of the history of money, right? I just kind of want you to think about the history of money. So, money has been shells, it's been rocks, it's been gold, it's been eventually coins. Okay, and then eventually it's evolved now to where it's paper backed by nothing. Okay, at least, our fiat currency is that. Equities, meaning stocks, bonds, those sorts of things. The first examples of equities in history go back about 500 years. Okay, so everything was riffing off of these old ideas about what currency is until Bitcoin in 2009, based on a white paper written by an anonymous programmer who took the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. This person who some people half seriously, half jokingly have described as a time traveler, because how could you see the future the way this man saw the future? Time traveler, visionary, certainly a mystic. He wrote a white paper and he described a new form of currency that is really the first innovation on what currency is, again, in 500 years. Okay, so he wrote basically this concept in a white paper and he published it online. And it was the foundation for a decentralized digital currency. Okay, so really, because we have some beginners in this conversation, I just want to explain what the difference is between decentralized and other forms of currency. Okay, so I'm not able to create money, fiat dollars. Okay, if I went to my printer and I created fiat dollars, I would very quickly find myself in a not great legal situation. Okay, because they would call that counterfeiting. Okay, so there's really only one organization that is allowed to create fiat dollars, and that is the Federal Reserve, which is not federal and is not a reserve. Okay, so if you read the book The Creature from Jekyll Island, you learn about 1913 and how the Federal Reserve was created to privatize the creation of currency, fiat currency in the United States. Okay, so basically there's only one organization that can create dollars, and they create a lot of them, backed by nothing, printed out of thin air. Okay, so that's an example of a centralized currency. There's only one entity that can create it, and everyone is dependent upon that entity and the system around them, the traditional banks and the traditional, everything related to centralized finance, all of those systems all work together to support fiat currencies. And I'm talking mostly USD, but please know that Canadian dollar, the British pound, the European euro, the Australian dollar, New Zealand dollar, the Swiss franc, all of the currencies that we commonly know are centralized and printed by central banks. Okay, so let's contrast that with a decentralized currency. A decentralized currency uses what we call the blockchain, which is a decentralized ledger. It is basically an accounting ledger that connects, really anyone can connect to this ledger and can verify the authenticity and the accuracy and the integrity of the ledger. Okay, so now instead of relying on a central bank and the central banking system, now access to value is decentralized and available to anyone globally, okay, through the technology of the internet, which connects all of us. Okay, so I'm not going to go too much further into blockchain. Just understand that Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer currency, meaning I can send it to you, you can send it to me, and we don't need any third party to tell us that we can or can't, or even really it's censorship free. There is no censorship of Bitcoin. I can send it to you and nobody can tell me that I can't. Okay, and that sending of value, that exchange of value between you and me, is recorded and verified by anyone who, quote unquote, mines Bitcoin or runs a node. And as we were listening to the intro music and welcoming everybody, I was showing on my screen share, I was showing the node that I run right here from my office. I run a Bitcoin node, which basically keeps the network secure and decentralized. Okay, so I'm actively contributing my electricity to keeping this network operating. And it's a network of the people, okay? Not a network of the banks, it's a network of the people, okay? So what Bitcoin as a peer-to-peer decentralized asset, what it becomes is an opportunity for people to own value that is not dependent upon the traditional systems. Okay, so as anyone who's been paying attention to what's been happening in the global financial system since 2008, the central banks have been printing massive amounts of money out of thin air just because they can and because they need to. This creates what we call inflation. Okay, so for every dollar that's printed, all of the other dollars that are in circulation devalue by just a little bit. Okay, so the more money that's printed, the less money your money is worth. Okay, because now there's just more of it out there, all chasing. There's essentially infinite money chasing finite goods. Okay, and that's the phenomenon of inflation. Bitcoin as a currency is built different. Okay, so not only is it decentralized, anyone can connect to anyone and exchange value. It's also got a hard cap of the maximum amount of Bitcoin that will ever be created. So it's limited. It is scarce. Okay, now this is an important point because as mystics, hear me, as mystics, we understand that there is unlimited amounts of everything in the universe. Okay, we are not living in a finite universe. We can manifest, right? We can manifest. We can, anything that can be imagined, we can create. Okay, so really, when you think about that perspective, it's like, oh, well, gold is a finite resource. That's what traditionally people had said. Oh, gold is finite, except they keep discovering more and more of it. Okay, so how finite is it if we keep discovering more and more of it? How finite is it when we can go and mine asteroids for it? Okay, so we quickly become to realize that the concept of gold as a finite asset, that's only relative to the abundance of other assets. Okay, it's not actually that finite. Okay, so this is something that I realized as I was waking up in 2016. I realized that really there's really infinite everything. And the only thing that could truly be scarce is a digital scarcity. Okay, so math can create scarcity. And so Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency cryptocurrency, meaning it's based on cryptography, meaning it's based on math. Okay, and that math, that program, that software that is Bitcoin, the technology that is Bitcoin, has limited the total Bitcoin that will ever be created to 21 million. Okay, so it's digital scarcity. Okay, so as we've talked about, fiat currency is not scarce. It's abundant, and with the passage of the big, beautiful spending bill and the lowering of interest rates globally, it's only getting more abundant. Okay. But Bitcoin is a scarce asset. It is made digitally scarce by math. Okay, so I'm seeing in the chat, it seems that Bitcoin is still tied to a traditional centralized currency. That's an illusion. It's actually an illusion because most people, it's a remnant of the old paradigm. Most people still think of things in dollar value, at least in the West, right? Or whatever your local currency is. So they think, oh, one Bitcoin is worth, well, as of this morning, $118,000. Okay, so a lot of people quote Bitcoin in dollars. And if you want to buy Bitcoin, you're most likely going to exchange dollars for it. But really, it's not tied to it other than what other people are willing to give someone who is selling Bitcoin, the amount of fiat currency they're willing to exchange for that Bitcoin. Okay, so it's like saying, are cars tied to the traditional centralized currency? Only if you want to buy or sell one. Or houses, right? Are houses tied to traditional centralized currency? Well, we tend to value houses in dollars. But really, that only matters if we want to either get a loan against it or buy or sell a house. Okay, so it's a fantastic question. So yes, it will. I think it will shift over time. Bitcoin's becoming a bigger conversation in a massive way in 2025 because the regulatory structures have now become, we have a very pro Bitcoin, very pro Financial Innovation Administration in the United States right now. Okay, so this is the key idea here. So Bitcoin allows individuals to control their own assets. Okay, so a lot of people think about gold. Oh, if I don't want to trust my local bank. Okay, let's start it this way. If I don't want to trust my local bank, then I either need to get a bunch of cash and stuff it in my mattress, okay? Which, as we said, cash is a depreciating asset. Okay, so that's not a good idea. That doesn't work. Or I need to buy something physical like gold or silver, which is, clunky, heavy, and now you have to store it, right? Which either you have to trust, a third party, you have to buy buy a service from someone who's going to store your gold, or you have to put it in your house, a safe, right? Something like that. And you'll find, because, I own gold and silver as well as Bitcoin, gold's not that portable. Okay, you try to make it across a border with gold, it's not going to work. Okay, you try to get on a plane with a gold bullion bar, that's not going to work. Okay, Bitcoin, on the other hand, it's code. Okay, so Bitcoin as an asset can be stored offline in what they call cold storage in a hardware wallet. Okay, a hardware wallet looks like a USB stick. And it has a little piece of software on it that basically holds the cryptographic keys to the value in your Bitcoin wallet. Okay, now that little USB stick sized wallet is very easy to travel with anywhere in the world, and you can literally take billions of dollars worth of value in your pocket anywhere in the world. Okay, you can't do that with any other traditional form of asset. Okay, you can't travel with $1 billion of gold. You can't travel with $1 billion of cash, and you can travel with $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. Okay, so this is a game changer, particularly for those who understand that centralized systems are shifting and evolving, and we're moving towards decentralized. Okay, so this is a way to take the value, that is yours, and actually take physical custody of it, okay? Which is unprecedented. Okay, it's an unprecedented opportunity to actually own your value. Okay, so in addition, so what determines the value of Bitcoin? Great question. Yes. What determines the value of Bitcoin is what people are willing to trade for it in fiat. Okay, at least for right now, that would be what determines the value of Bitcoin. Because the Bitcoin people will tell you, one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. Okay, meaning that Bitcoin is a value ecosystem in and of itself. Yes, exactly, Sarah. So as the dollar loses value, the value of Bitcoin, people are going to be willing to pay more for Bitcoin because the dollar loses value and Bitcoin is scarce. It is finite. There's only so many that will ever be created. 21 million. It's a hard cap, and it's scarce, and it's portable, and it's transportable. Okay. So this brings us to the point where we can be our own bank. Okay. So a couple of years ago, I was enlightened. We'll say it's a weird word to use, but I became aware of banking, like some of the darker sides of banking. And when I woke up to some of the darker aspects of the banking system, which I'm not going to go into too much detail about, I closed all of my national banking accounts and I moved my bank to a local credit union. I moved all of my banking activities to a local credit union because I realized that that was in alignment with my personal values. Okay, so to me, it matters what I invest my currency in, what I invest my value in. If dollars come through my hands, if any type of form of value comes through my hands, I see myself as a steward of that value. Okay, I see my fiat dollars as little employees, that work for me. Okay, so they work for me either by going out and creating more value when I invest them, or they work for me by promoting my values when I invest them in ways that some people would call spending. I don't really believe in spending money. I really only believe in investing money, meaning I'm getting a return, that is greater. So, for instance, I value the local economy. I actively seek to support the local restaurateurs in my area. I don't go to chains. I go to local. I know the people. Where I can shake their hand and they recognize me and know my name when I come in. Okay, I like that. My partner actively seeks out, for really everything that she furnishes the house with, or like her personal fashion and jewelry. She actively seeks out solopreneur creators online who are, making jewelry in-house, right? Small business, family owned, in some cases, even their kids are helping, like that type of thing. Okay, so we like to invest our money in that way. So when I started to wake up about money and about the good ways it can be used and the not so good ways it can be used, I was like, okay, let me take my power back. I took all of my money out of the big banks and I went with a local credit union so that my money is invested locally, improves the lives of the people around me. And I started to treat my money with respect. Okay. And I also at the same time, by the way, points worth pointing out, I had money invested in, traditional ETFs. And I started to realize that there was a lot of companies that my money was invested in, companies that I owned through shares, that did not align with my personal values. Okay. So that happens to also be the ones that pay the biggest dividends. That's big tobacco, big cancer, big chemical, big pharma. And I realized that I was not okay with just closing my eyes to the profiting off of human suffering and just letting my dollars grow on the backs of all of these things that I don't believe in. Okay, so what I did is I closed all of those positions. I took all of that money out and I started looking for other ways to invest in what I believe in. Okay, so Bitcoin obviously for me is one of those things. I believe in the decentralization and personal sovereignty that is the ethos at the core of Bitcoin. There's other examples as well, but I don't want to go too far into that. Okay, so now we have the opportunity to be our own bank. Okay, and this is very significant for personal empowerment. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of people talk about how traditionally one of the wealth recipes was to try to buy rental houses. Take out loans, buy rental houses, fix them up, either flip them and resell them or rent them out and try to, it's like the real estate way to get wealth. Okay. And then, you're trying to build cash flow or income from having tenants. And now a lot of people that did this old school model of trying to build physical wealth, they're realizing that something like Bitcoin meets what their goal was for real estate, but in a way that comes with none of the headaches of owning real estate. Okay, so Bitcoin is an appreciating asset. It's an asset that can generate income. It can be a generating asset if you know how to set it up, what to do with it. You can generate yield off of Bitcoin. Just like these houses are allegedly going up in value, but really, if you look at it, it's not that houses are increasing in value; it's that the dollar is decreasing in value. So, it's like everything is. Real estate is one of those things that really goes up when the dollar inflates. But real estate is actually decreasing in value when priced in Bitcoin. Okay, so a house that would have cost, let's say 70, 100 Bitcoin a couple years ago, probably costs 4 or 5 today, especially at $118,000. Okay, so it's like, okay, that when you kind of flip the script that way and look at housing, it's like these houses aren't getting nicer. Okay, unless people are actively updating and improving them. Like a house just sitting there for 10 years and going up in value, it's not getting nicer. It's actually, just the fact that everything is inflating. Like the value is inflating because the dollars are inflating. Okay, question from the chat. Can you pay for a house with Bitcoin? Yeah. So the comptroller of the currency in the United States issued a memorandum last week directing the it was like Fannie, Freddie, some of those centralized governmental organizations that have a lot to do with housing policy and how houses are financed. There was a memorandum that was issued that said, these agencies need to start to create frameworks for evaluating digital assets as parts of people's personal financial statements when evaluating creditworthiness for buying a house. So basically, it's we're at the forefront of legislation with this. But yes, we are rapidly approaching an era. If you do it today, you would probably have to find a seller that you could trade your Bitcoin for the house. Okay, but very soon, I would say before 2030, you will actually be able to show Bitcoin as an asset that you hold and use that as collateral for your house, right? And then you'll pay off the mortgage in dollars and keep the Bitcoin. Okay, so that day is coming. Ariel says, actually, I'm looking up in the chat here. Early says, crypto seems so complicated because there are other coins other than Bitcoin, and I paid cash for a variety of coins, but it didn't go up in value, so I don't see what's so good about it. Okay, so that was a mistake that many people can relate to. So Bitcoin is not like other cryptos. A lot of people saw the success of Bitcoin and made kind of gimmick projects, meme coins, hype coins, all this type of stuff. And that's why I will never talk about things other than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the pure play. It's decentralized. There's a hard cap on how much will ever be created. And if you look at the charts, you can see it is the clear winner over time, the clear winner. Everything else is a distraction. In my mind, until you own at least 0.1 Bitcoin, don't bother buying anything else. My niece, a couple months ago, messaged me because she knows I'm very active in the markets. And she said, hey, I'm thinking about you. I'm starting, she's 21, by the way. She's like, I'm starting to invest money, buying some stocks. I'm nervous, but I know it's important to take risks. This is what I told her. I said, it's good that you're starting to invest and that you're open to taking risks. And also, you, in my opinion, should not consider buying stocks until you own at least 0.1 Bitcoin. Because we're entering a window of time between 2025 and 2030 where Bitcoin is revolutionizing the financial system. And in that period of time, I see it going to over $1 million, honestly. I think it's gonna go even higher than that. But I think around 2030, we're looking at about a 10x from where it sits right now. And so I said, you need to own 0.1 Bitcoin. And once you've accumulated that, which by the way, as of today would cost about, it's about $11,000 to own 0.1, $12,000. Once you've accumulated that, then you can start to buy stocks. And I told her a story. Okay, this is not my only Bitcoin story, but I used this story to illustrate to her so that she could understand. In 2019, I bought someone a pizza, and they sent me $20 on Cash App to reimburse me for the pizza. I didn't use Cash App. I had no need for that $20. So what did I do? I bought Bitcoin. I ran a calculator. If I had bought the S&P, just the index, right, with that $20 in 2019, that $20 as of today in 2025, 6 years later, would be worth around $35. But I didn't buy the S&P 500. I bought Bitcoin. Guess how much it's worth today? $280, roughly. That's not actually accounting for the movement that happened yesterday and in today, but about $284, we'll say. A massive gain on $20, okay? And I told her, I said, this is the power of Bitcoin. It's going to keep doing this, okay? Save your money in Bitcoin, okay? So, all right, let's continue with our track here though, okay? So be your own bank, all right? That's the idea. Bitcoin allows you to be your own bank, allows you to store value offline. Okay, if there ever is a banking system crisis, this is a way for you to hold value outside of the system altogether. Okay, the next comment I saw here is money as energy and an opportunity to connect with aligned beings and teal organizations. Yes. From a mystic and authorship lens, it does seem there's always an opportunity for humans to continue to elevate their relationship with abundance beyond the default conditioned ways. Bitcoin for some may be a solution. Well said, Ariel. I like this idea of elevating the relationship with abundance. You know, there's a lot of mystics who join the mystic path because they have a desire for wealth and financial abundance. And because of the programming, the incessant programming of the society, you know, if you think about film, if you think about TV, if you think about music, all of these people promote this perspective that US dollars is wealth. Okay, you think about, hip hop music as an example, right? How many songs are sung about dollars? Okay, so it's like this spell. It's not like this spell. It is a spell that has transfixed and dominated the thought patterns of billions of people globally. Okay, but it's a depreciating asset. It's not true wealth, at least not in my perspective. Okay, so the next question is, well, what is true wealth? Well, true wealth is hard assets. Okay, so like it's things that are appreciating in value. And I think the most timely and potent example of that is Bitcoin. Okay, again, digital, decentralized, artificially, meaning digitally scarce, only ever be 21 million of them. It's divisible. Okay, each Bitcoin, there's only 21 million, but each one is divisible to 8 decimal points. Okay, they call a partial Bitcoin, they call, down to that 8 decimal points, that's Satoshis. It's like dollars is to cents as Bitcoin is to Satoshis. Okay, so Satoshis. So it can actually replace all of the value in the global financial system if it's used all the way out to that 8 decimal points. Now, I'm not one of those people that's going to tell you that USD is going away and that everything will be denominated in Bitcoin. I see the two systems living side by side, at least for our lifetimes. Okay, and then eventually maybe something will even replace Bitcoin. Okay, my sense is that Treasury Secretary is well aware of the global shifts. I would not be surprised if the USA has a digital currency and leaves the dollar sooner than later. They will have to. Yes. So this is, again, a perfect example of why Bitcoin is the perfect asset to, it's a hard asset that is going to appreciate dramatically in value while the dollar depreciates. Songs about money create morphic fields, Ariel says. Yes, that's absolutely true. Okay, let's continue what we're talking about here. We've got about 20 minutes. Uh, what's the best way to load up on Bitcoin for someone who doesn't have a job or consistent income? It's a good question. I mean, it's a form of value, right? So chances are you are going to exchange value for it. Okay, so a lot of people online right now are talking about taking second jobs just to fuel their Bitcoin purchases because they understand the setup that's occurring right now. Um, you know, if you're at the point where you're like, how do I get more Bitcoin without exchanging dollars for it? I'm not really sure what the answer would be. Back in the beginning, you could mine Bitcoin. That's not really accessible to individuals in the way that it used to be. Mining Bitcoin, it's really been taken over by mining corporations. It's like gold, like gold. You could go mine for gold, but really it's the corporations that mine for gold that do the best. Similar thing with Bitcoin at this stage. I would say whatever income you are able to spare, you could look at that potentially as a way to buy Bitcoin. Personally, what I've been doing for many years is I buy Bitcoin every day. I buy it every day. Why every day? Because Bitcoin is volatile. Okay, that's usually when it makes the headlines, right? It shoots up and makes a new high, and then it comes crashing back down, and people panic. It's like I like to tune out all of that noise because my vision is for the long term. Okay, I'm not even thinking about. Actually, we're at the point now where you'll never have to sell your Bitcoin. But I'm not even thinking about even remotely entertaining the idea of trading my Bitcoin for dollars for a minimum of 5 years. Okay, so I like to tune out the noise and just buy every day. Okay, so I have it on autopilot. Every day I'm buying an absolute minimum of $5. And that's literally 365 days a year. I have it set up on my Strike app. And I shared a link to that earlier. And when you set up what they call dollar cost averaging purchases, there's no fees on your recurring purchase. That's one of the things I really appreciate about that app. So I'm not paying fees on that $5 a day. And then whenever I see, that Bitcoin's gone on sale, it's dipped, then maybe I throw an extra, 20, 30, 50, 100, whatever I have, just kind of sitting around that I want to invest for the future. I'll just throw that in to kind of, load up a little bit more. But what I like about buying every day is it frees me from having to stare at the price. I buy every day. I'll buy the top, I'll buy the bottom. It doesn't matter. I just buy every day. And then I'll look at it, in 5 years, and my $20 has gone to $285, right? So, a week's worth, if every week I'm putting in $20, actually putting in $35, right? But if you do the math, it's like, okay, then I'll think about it. But again, the idea here is to ultimately have your own value and be able to hold it independently, decentralized, in alignment with your personal ethos of personal sovereignty, not being dependent on a bank, right? Banks can be gatekeepers. It's like, oh, you need to get a loan. Well, they need to look at your tax returns, your income statements, all this type of stuff. But now with Bitcoin, I can get a loan just simply by putting the Bitcoin as collateral. And there's no credit check. There's no asset check. There's no tax returns. There's no personal financial statement. There's nothing. It's just the Bitcoin. That's the collateral. And there are platforms right now that will happily loan against it just because it's the most pristine collateral there is for a loan. Way better than a house. If you think about a house, if a bank has to foreclose on a house, it takes 6 months. There's court processes and this and that and everything else. It's very expensive to foreclose on a house. But with Bitcoin, it's very easy, right? If you decide not to repay the loan, they'll just take the asset. It's like, and then obviously if you do repay the loan, you get the asset back. So it opens up this whole new world of financial solutions. Okay, trying to stay true to my trajectory here. I had an outline for this call. Okay, so now we are at the point where corporations and nation states are adopting Bitcoin as their primary treasury asset. Well, it so happens that I beat a lot of these companies to this. I adopted Bitcoin as my personal primary treasury asset in 2023. So this is what that is. So when you adopt it as your primary treasury asset, you stop denominating your wealth in dollars and you start denominating it in Bitcoin. So a lot of major companies and countries are beginning to do this. The United States, with the most recent administration, declared a national strategic Bitcoin reserve. Other countries around the world have followed suit. El Salvador is an example of one country that has declared it legal tender. I'm not aware of any other nations that have gone that far yet, but a lot of nations are talking about it, and there are multiple United States such as Texas, New Hampshire, Wyoming. I don't actually know the whole list. I just know that it's somewhere around 13 at this point that are in the process of adopting Bitcoin reserves. Okay, so these big boys, they're catching on. They're starting to realize what type of asset it is. And as they do this, they are starting to borrow money from their investors, companies in particular, not so much states. States are perhaps holding it in tax revenues. They're holding tax revenues in Bitcoin. States are borrowing money from investors. They're selling stock, selling shares, selling bonds, notes, to raise the dollars to buy the Bitcoin. The most prominent example of this is a company called MicroStrategy, which recently rebranded to Strategy. They're the most aggressive example of this. But looking at the news this morning, the feeds are filled with announcements from corporations globally, all over the world. Japan, UK, United States, Canada, announcing that they are switching from using fiat currency as their chief treasury asset to Bitcoin. Okay, so they're catching on. It's starting to be adopted. And what this creates is trillions and trillions of dollars competing for 21 million Bitcoin. Okay, so just to put this in perspective, I read a statistic. They said if every person who is a dollar millionaire asked their financial advisor to get them one Bitcoin, there's not enough. There's not enough. That's how scarce it is. Okay, so if you think about all of the people who have 100K sitting around and all of a sudden they wake up one day and they're like, oh my God, I need to buy this scarce, hard asset. Okay, that's a lot of competition for a scarce asset. Okay, so it's up, if and I just want to make it clear why I'm saying this. Okay, so if you have a vision for your life that includes wealth and abundance, it's important to be an early adopter to technologies that change everything. Think about the people that saw the vision for Microsoft, okay, saw the vision for Apple, okay. There's, and so many other examples, AT&T back in the day, right? I was talking to someone who is a baby boomer, and they're like, oh, for us, it was getting in on the phone companies, right? So if you have a vision for wealth and abundance, it's important to think that way. Not just imagine it, but also begin to become it. Make that your identity. Right? I am a wealthy, abundant person. That means I think like someone on the cutting edge. Okay, so it's important to begin to adopt that, as your way of being. Make that part of your identity, not just something that you daydream about, but something that you are. Okay, so thinking this way, seeing, beginning to see the world this way, and then educating yourself on what these up and coming technologies are, and then casting your own vision. Okay, so with that, in the last couple minutes here, I want to share a little bit about my Bitcoin story. Okay, so I knew from the age of 5 or 6, I knew that I was going to grow up to be a man of significant financial influence. I knew that wealth and abundance was in my future. I came from a family that had just enough. I was never hungry, but we also, my family of origin, also just kind of got by, at least when I was growing up. And so I very quickly realized that I was destined to transcend the family cycle of poverty. And so I had the dream of being a man of significant financial influence. That was kind of how I saw it at that time. I was like, I knew that I was going to do big things and it would require financial resources to do it. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, I had a dream. This is a true story. As crazy as it sounds, especially for those who are not mystics, okay, but those of us that understand visions and dreams and how all time is now. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, I had a dream. We'll call it a vision, a mystic vision. And in that vision, I saw the future. And in that future, I saw cryptocurrency. I saw all of the different currencies. I saw the exchanges. And there is this voice present. And in the dream, this voice was showing me like a whiteboard. And it was showing me all of the different currencies, the different exchanges, how fiat dollars and all the global currencies interact with all of these cryptocurrencies, and how there'd be people that would exchange them back and forth and take a cut of a fee for doing the service of exchanging back and forth, and how companies would launch their own. And like literally, I was shown the financial system of the age of intelligence. Right? The intelligence age, right? Because we were in the industrial age, and then we were in the information age, and now we're in the intelligence age. So I was shown the financial system of the intelligence age. And all these pieces and parts. And I didn't really understand it at 9 or 10. I just knew that I had seen something that I didn't quite have words for. But it stuck with me. It stuck with me. Okay, so 2010 is the first time I heard about Bitcoin. It was, the network was set up in 2009. 2010, I heard about Bitcoin, and I downloaded my first wallet. But I could not find a way to buy it. I didn't know anybody who had any. There was, I'd have to trust somebody that I couldn't see, and like send them a PayPal or something. I think PayPal was the thing back then. So I didn't know how to buy it. So I was just like, well, I wish I could, but I don't really, I didn't know of any exchanges, and I was like, okay, so I kind of forgot about it, went on living my life. In 2013, I got a phone call out of the blue, from a young man who I had hired as a sales rep about 9 or 10 months prior, and I hadn't talked to him in months. Okay, I'd hired him in Houston. He was one of my top performers. He was really good at selling, and he did really, really well. He made a bunch of money, and he made me a bunch of money because I was leading the market. So my market was performing really well, and so we were on good terms and had good respect for each other. I treated him really well. He treated me really well, and apparently he always thought of me in a positive way. And I'm so grateful, because 9 or 10 months later, I hadn't talked to him in all this time. He calls me out of the blue, and I pick up and I go, "Ray, what's up?" And he goes, "Man, I got to tell you about something." I was like, okay, I got a minute. Like, tell me what's up. And he proceeds to tell me about how he has gotten into mining Bitcoin, using these specialized pieces of computer hardware called ASICs. Don't need to know what an ASIC is. It's like a special type of computer processor. And he starts telling me about this, and he goes, "You need to do this." And I was like, not convinced. I was like, what do you, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like mining, I don't know. And he's like, "You trust me on this one. In fact, what's your address? I'm going to send you one right now." He had just upgraded his rig. He had one that worked, but he didn't need. He's like, "I'm going to send you one right now." So I gave him my address, and this man sends me a Bitcoin miner, which of course leads me to educate myself about mining Bitcoin. Okay, long story short, because we're coming up on time. I got into mining Bitcoin. I set up a rig in my loft. Actually set up 3 rigs in my loft, and throughout 2013, 2014, and into the beginning of 2015, I was mining Bitcoin from my attic. 2015, the network was getting popular enough that the difficulty went way up, the difficulty of mining, meaning it was much harder to get Bitcoin from mining. And soon my electric bill was higher than what I was earning in the Bitcoin that I was mining. So I shut down the rigs and I proceeded to just trade it, like a normal, just dollars for Bitcoin, whatever. There's a lot more I could say there, but again, I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to cut to the chase. I didn't take it seriously. I want to be clear about that. Even though I had this dream when I was, 2009, 9 or 10 years old, I didn't take it seriously. I didn't put 2 and 2 together at this stage. For me, it was something that was fun and cool and maybe a way, like a side hustle, make a little bit of money. I didn't see it at that stage, 2013, 2014, 2015. I didn't see it taking over the global financial system as it has and is starting to do today. But that all changed in 2016 when I had a dream. Again with the dreams, my friends. I had a dream in 2016 that made me sit up from that dream, like almost shaking. It's hard to describe the impact of that dream, but I remember it vividly, and I also wrote it down. It was such a moving dream. It was haunting. And in that dream, I saw that Bitcoin was the foundation of what I had seen when I was 9 or 10 in that vision. I finally put 2 and 2 together. And that's when I stopped messing around and I started taking it seriously. It's when I started to respect it as a technology. And so in that dream, I saw that the world would begin to adopt it. I actually saw what could best be described as a panic to own Bitcoin. I don't think we're quite there yet. I think that's coming. I think we will see it, but I don't think we're quite there yet. Like literally people panicking because they need to own it. So that dream, that's when I decided to become an ambassador for the network, because I started to realize how important it is that people find out about this. Okay, so some lessons learned, all right? So like I said, I hadn't really taken it seriously. Even though I at one point owned what today would be worth about 35 or $40 million, I didn't hold it because I didn't take it seriously. Okay, now just to be clear, I do not condemn or judge my younger self for that. I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I've learned to give myself profound grace, for not knowing what I didn't know. Okay. So it's learning points along the way. Like it's literally something that I've learned what the value is. And then I started to treat it as the value that it would become, even when it wasn't there yet. Okay. So it was around 2016 when I had that dream. And then 2016, 2017, 2018, I started to treat it like it was worth $100,000 each. I stopped, frittering it away or, just, whatever silly things I had been doing with it before, including selling it, right? Holding the signal even when the dream fought back. Yes. Okay, so I want to connect the principles of Bitcoin to visionary leadership as we wrap up this quite unusual special edition visionary leadership call. Visionary leadership and the teal organizations that we've been talking about. Teal organizations are a new paradigm model of how humans organize and collaborate and work together. And part of that new paradigm is decentralizing authority. Okay? Authority, right? Decentralizing that. Okay, so giving each person the power back. Okay, each person taking the power back. And honestly, if I could boil down everything we've talked about in Bitcoin, that's what it comes down to. Bitcoin is about taking the power back. Okay, so I run a node that supports this, a node, a little device connected to the internet that runs Bitcoin software. I run that from my office. okay? And I run that because I'm contributing to my peers, okay? And my peers are everyone who runs a node and uses Bitcoin, okay? So I don't need a bank to run a node for me. I am my own bank. I run my own node, okay? I don't need to go, to a bank, to trust them to hold my currency, even though, I do still transact in USD, right? So I have a credit union for that. I can hold and maintain and store my own value. Okay, I can do it in the palm of my hand. I can even know my own seed phrase, and I can memorize it, and then I can hold billions of dollars worth of value in Bitcoin in my brain. Okay, so that is the very epitome of taking the power back. Okay, being able to hold your wealth in your brain. I don't recommend it. I recommend you do cold storage, but still, it's possible. That's the level of innovation we're talking about. Okay, being able to hold your value in your mind, with your 24-word seed phrase. Okay, that's the cryptographic key. Okay, so decentralization is the key idea of teal organizations. It's allowing the work to emerge through us, asking the soul of our work what needs to come through today, and then empowering the individuals to contribute in that way. And I see Bitcoin as being central to teal organizations going forward. Okay, so one of my dreams for the School of Imagination and the Guild is to incubate businesses, small businesses that will be launched by mystics who have come through Brave Mystic training and entered into the incubators. And these businesses will be founded on the principles of teal organizations, and they will most likely begin with Bitcoin treasuries. Okay, a true new paradigm small business, contributing value from the soul to the planet. And I believe that's exactly what the time in human history is asking from us as visionary leaders. Okay, to hold that vision clearly. Okay, so I'm going to do 5 minutes for questions, and then we're done for today. Any questions or comments about what we've talked about so far? Are other coins a part of Bitcoin, or are they something totally different? Great question. Thank you for asking that. Bitcoin is Bitcoin. Other coins can use similar technology, but they are not Bitcoin. Bitcoin is Bitcoin. And it's only BTC. Things like Bitcoin Cash, even it's cheaper for a reason, right? You want to buy the real thing, Bitcoin, BTC. Other coins are, in my opinion, a distraction. Is there an app you buy Bitcoin through if you have never bought any? Yes. So there is an app. I will share the one that I use. This app allows you to buy Bitcoin and hold it in a wallet on your phone. Once you've accumulated $1,000 or more of Bitcoin, you will want to store it offline, which requires some tech savvy. If you're open to the challenge of learning that tech savvy, proceed. If you're unsure or unclear, or maybe not open to the challenge, which, no judgment on my side. It is a project. It'll be a project to learn how to do this. Then there are other ways to buy it, but it is through an intermediary, a third party, an ETF. BlackRock has an ETF. iShares has an ETF. So this is a traditional stock market product where you buy it in your brokerage account or in your retirement account, and then they hold the Bitcoin for you. Now, personally, that's not how I do it, because for me, the whole point is for me to be able to hold the value in my hand. And so if BlackRock is holding it for me, then the value is not in my hand. Okay. But for those of you that maybe it's a bridge too far, I would say it's better to have exposure through an ETF than to not do it at all. Okay. That's my personal opinion, not financial advice. Okay. The app I use is called Strike. I already posted in the live chat, but I will post it again in the call notes. Omar says, I joined late. Is there a recording? It is being recorded. I have not posted last week's recording yet. I've been up to other things. Last week's recording is coming. This one will be posted as well. I'll make sure that it goes up and the announcement goes out. A couple comments. Thank you. Super interesting. I've always thought of crypto as the gateway to true authorship and a reminder for all elements of life we can create. More life-affirming systems. Things like communities focus on exchange, open source software, etc. The inspiration goes beyond currency. Yes, exactly. I think it's a whole ecosystem. I think it's a whole world. I think it's a whole paradigm. And some of us are already living in it, and a lot of people are starting to load, basically upgrade their software to join it, right? So it's a whole new way of thinking, and that's why we do these visionary leadership calls to help the broadcast that signal of the new paradigm way of thinking. About the wallet, do you need a separate wallet? Because ChatGPT is recommending Blue Wallet. So an offline cold storage wallet must be purchased from a reputable source. I would not necessarily take ChatGPT's recommendation on this. I will share the company that I have, and you have to buy it straight from the company. There's a lot of reasons for this. It's basically security. You don't want it to be tampered with. So you have to buy it straight from the company. I will post that in the notes when I do the call notes as well. I'll post the company that I have used and trust. Actually, I'll give you two options that are vetted. When I listen to you, I feel a small fear of missing out blossoming. Okay, it's very important to recognize that and to question it. Yeah, precisely because of the artificial digital cap. I know that I don't need to make choices out of fear. How does the limitedness of Bitcoin relate to the truth of unlimited abundance? It seems paradoxical. Okay, Joseph, you may have missed what I was speaking about earlier when I said that there's unlimited abundance except that which is mathematically limited. So the only thing that can truly be scarce would be things that are made scarce through math, right? Would there always be more gold, silver, cash, uranium, plutonium, water, oil? Only something that is digitally, artificially scarce could be scarce, in my opinion. I think that's math. I think that's part of the code of the simulation that we're living in. At least that's my perspective. It is important not to make choices out of fear. And the fear of missing out is still a fear. Okay, so fear of missing out is not where I would start this journey. I would choose to start this journey with educating myself on the vision of what Bitcoin is as a technology. And then when I buy Bitcoin every day, should I choose to do so, every day when I see that transaction come through on my phone that I bought, $5, $10, whatever dollars worth of Bitcoin, I would use that as a mystic moment to reinforce my personal values of sovereignty, independence, decentralization, authorship. Okay, so Bitcoin has reached its level of prominence through creative power of imagination. Okay, not just me. I know of at least 10 other people personally that have been imagining it reaching this. Okay, but I'm sure conscious mystics, it's probably, thousands of conscious mystics have been imagining this. So it is an asset that blossoms on imagination. Okay, so I when I get my daily purchase notification on my phone, I use that as a mystic moment to affirm prosperity, wealth, personal sovereignty, decentralization, my values. Okay, thanks for clarifying that. I need to educate myself. Yes. Okay, so there's a couple people you can listen to that I think have good amounts of signal. Um, One is Michael Saylor. He's the chief Bitcoin officer for MicroStrategy, which is now rebranded to Strategy. It's the largest corporate holder of Bitcoin. He is a Bitcoin evangelist. He goes out and he talks to companies and nations about Bitcoin. I've listened to several of his talks. I think he does a pretty good job of explaining the ethos of Bitcoin. And he's helped me clarify my vision because I think that what he speaks is very true to the core vision of what Bitcoin is and what it represents. There's a couple other folks as well, but some of the people that I pointed to earlier when people were asking in the live chat on Discord, some of those people, I pointed to the videos, and then once I was like, I should probably check. And once I actually watched the video, I realized it was not beginner. It was probably still intermediate or possibly even advanced. So, make it a project. They say commit to investing 100 hours to learn about Bitcoin. Commit to investing 100 hours to learn about Bitcoin. Is your personal financial independence and sovereignty and long-term wealth and prosperity for you and your children worth 100 hours of education? I think it is. I truly think it is. Okay, so I hope your takeaway is not, oh, Josiah says I need to buy Bitcoin. That's not what we said today. Okay, the takeaway is I need to educate myself on Bitcoin. I need to learn about this. I need to commit to investing the time to really become financially sovereign in this way. Okay, it was so easy when we outsourced our retirements to a financial advisor who just knew all that stuff and did it all for us. Okay, but that's the old paradigm. And the new model is taking our future and our destiny into our own hands and using the creative power of imagination to imagine wisely. Okay, that's the way forward. I think 100 hours is going to give you enough knowledge to be what people call dangerous, right? You'll know enough to be dangerous, meaning to be an author. I think that's when people joke about, oh, I know enough to be dangerous. I think you know enough to be an author, meaning that you can write down your vision of what it is for you and for your family, and you can create a plan. I'm aware you have grandchildren, and this is the sort of thing that, yes, we're in a 5-year window where it's going to go parabolic, according to my vision, and then into the 2040s, we're looking at 8 figures per coin. And that's not meant to be in hyperbole. That's literally based on the printing of the U.S. dollar. Like the dollar inflates, Bitcoin absorbs. It could. Michael Saylor, for example, he says, it'll be $13 million. By the time we get to 2040. So when you start considering that, this becomes an asset that can be passed down. A lot of people are buying not for themselves, but for their posterity. Okay, so that's something to consider as well. All right, my friends, thank you for your live engagement. This has been a highly unusual and unique visionary leadership call. There is no visionary leadership call next week. I'm out of town on family vacation. We will resume them the following week. So until then, imagine wisely, my friends. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you all again soon.